Okay, so many of you know my main niches that I invest is Edmonton and Saskatoon. So I was pretty pleased today, last week, to see this article in the Western Investor. And I'm kind of been going through some decision making on which one of these markets that I favor. I go back and forth because Saskatchewan has advantages over Alberta, but Alberta also has advantages over Saskatchewan. So the purpose of this video today and the live stream is I just want to give you guys my perspective because this is completely up-to-date information. And I just want to share, first of all, my excitement that both of my chosen areas ended up on this list and some advantages and disadvantages over each area for those who are thinking of investing. So on that, I'm just going to share my screen here and I'm going to show you what I'm looking at here. So this was the article in question. This came out on November the 2nd. So this was the Western Investor article in question here. So top 5 towns for real estate investors. So for those of you who don't know about the Western Investor, this has been around for as long as I've been investing. It's a really great piece, especially for Western Canada, British Columbia, Alberta, and Saskatchewan. There's a lot of great deals in here. So when these guys write articles, they usually do a lot of research. So this is a really good one. So a year of investing pragmatically and strategically means turning from a flash to the proven in Western investors annual pick for the best places to buy real estate in 2024. A bit of a tongue twister there. So number one, of course, well, not of course for some people, but Edmonton. So number one this year for the towns to invest was chosen as Edmonton. So Edmonton was named the most affordable city in Canada for renters in a national survey, and it has among the lowest and most stable housing prices in the country, according to the Canadian Real Estate Association. In Alberta's capital city, the average one-bedroom rent is $1,130, unchanged in a year. So basically, rents haven't moved in a year, considering Edmonton also has really high incomes that I'm going to get into in a second. The average September home price was $374,100, 3.8% less than a year earlier, and 57% below the national average. So obviously Edmonton, a very affordable place to live for people that are moving there. We've seen a big run up in Calgary. This massive price appreciation has not hit Edmonton yet. So this is the piece that I found interesting here. For pragmatic commercial investors, Edmonton means opportunity, especially for multifamily investors. The average apartment building sells for $134,000 per door, according to Avis & Young, which notes record levels of immigration are driving apartment demand, which has suppressed the vacancy rate to a 7-year low. Multifamily capitalization rates average a healthy 5%. So those people in Edmonton that remember, we had the oil crash, basically 2014, right up until COVID. And the vacancy rate in Edmonton was very high. It was around 7 to 10% for a very long time. That is now coming down really fast. Not to the point yet where we're seeing a massive increase in rents, although we have started to raise our rents in Edmonton. But I think you're going to see a dramatic pickup in rents in the next 24 months. So that's the good news about Edmonton. Meanwhile, Edmonton's industrial market saw a positive absorption for 12 straight quarters with no signs of a slowdown. So this is also a good news in terms of, the industrial and maybe a sign of the energy sector resurgence. Vacancy rate of 4.3%, 2 million square feet under construction and average lease rates, the second lowest in Canada at 10.57 per square foot. Industrial investors from Vancouver, Calgary, and Toronto will be turning to affordable, accessible Edmonton in 2024. So great news from Edmonton and some obvious reasons on why this made the top 10 list. I'm going to skip by the British Columbia ones for this video for the purposes they're not applicable to this. Number 4, Saskatoon. Somewhere I also own multifamily, where a lot of people are looking to buy. Another fantastic place to invest in multifamily. Saskatoon makes our go-to list for 2024 for its steady demand, affordable prices, and potential returns in retail, multifamily, and industrial real estate. Saskatchewan will post a 2% growth, 2% GDP growth in 2024, among the leading provinces during a muted year. According to the Conference Board of Canada, the board notes strength in agriculture and mining right on cue. The $7.5 billion BHP Jansen mine, which is the biggest potash mine on Earth, has started north of Saskatoon with a promise of 2,500 jobs. Now, to put that in perspective, for an area the size of Saskatoon, that is a huge deal. This is going to bring a tremendous amount to the city. And they just also announced a massive expansion on the Jansen project as well. The mine will push demand in Saskatoon's industrial sector, which has the third lowest vacancy rate in Canada at 1.6%, so very low industrial vacancy as well. While rising demand could drive new spaces to a record high $15 per square foot in 2024. So again, for the prairies, that's really high numbers. Saskatchewan's largest city, with 300,000 residents, has high household income, yet the average home price is $378,800. So you'll notice that's actually higher than Edmonton, which is kind of funny to see that. Among Canada's lowest, and one-bedroom rents for $1,075. The city is home to the University of Saskatchewan and one of Canada's most prominent biotechnical research centers. So Saskatoon has a lot going for it. It's very much diversified. But what it has in common is it's very affordable, right? You see the house price, less than 400, and the rent's 1,075. I mean, two-bedroom rents in Canada, I think, have cracked now 2,200 or 2,100. So we're looking at like half the value of rents in other parts of the country. So I think you're going to see a big change in rents in both of these areas in the next 24 months. But just kind of looking at the difference between the two, just going back up to Edmonton here for a second. One thing they say about multifamily is, again, you can see the home price, 374, right? And the rents, one-bedroom rents are 1,130. So they're a little bit higher than Saskatoon, but not very much, okay? But the commercial is the piece that's really interesting. They don't mention price per door in Saskatoon, but it's actually about the same. Probably around 135 a door for good quality multifamily. Now, I think in a year or 2 years from now, I think you're going to see that number go way up with rents and stabilizing interest rates. I don't see the economy going sideways anytime soon in either of these locations, although, recessions can happen and demand can ease, as we've seen fairly quickly under certain world events. So just taking a look now at the incomes, drilling down closely at the incomes of these two areas, which is primarily a decision of, where I decide to invest. So people that are in CMHC, particularly MLI Select will be familiar with this chart. So this is the real median household income before tax with selected households in Canadian provinces and metropolitan areas. So the CMHC, they use this as a guide to determine what your rent cap is if you're using their affordable housing programs. So as you can see, I mean, Alberta, has really high incomes in general compared to the rest of the country, significantly higher than Saskatchewan. Even though if we're comparing apples to oranges here, the housing and the rents are similar. But you see the incomes are a lot higher in Alberta. BC's not far behind, but if you take out the Northwest Territories, the Yukon and Nunavut, Alberta is significantly higher than any other province in all of Canada. So that's the first thing of note is the high income levels. Now, if I drill down a little bit further and I look down and I see Edmonton here, the income is 66,600. So this is actually the number that they're using to get the median renter income, which is your rent cap for MLI Select. So basically what they've done is they've taken a third of this number, around 20 grand, and then divided that by 12 months. So that's giving a rent of around 1,650. That's your max rent if you're opting into this program. Now, it doesn't matter if you have a bachelor suite, a one-bedroom, a three-bedroom, 1,600 is the number. And for most apartment units in Edmonton, they're under that number. So it automatically qualifies as affordable. Now, the same can't be said for Saskatoon. You can see our incomes are quite a bit lower here. So 43,600. This translates into a median renter income of only about $1,000, $1,050. So if you're using the MLI Select formula in Saskatoon, you're going to be limited on your rent caps a lot more than you are in Alberta. So the formula just works better in Alberta because of the higher income levels. So it's important to look at these and, look at a little bit of the context and the history. So that's why I kind of pulled these numbers and I went back a little bit here just to see where things were at. Because, before the crash, before the 2008 crash, Saskatchewan was lagging Alberta by quite a bit, 34,600 to 51,800. After the crash, during the crash, obviously, was the number was exasperated even more. But Saskatchewan, kind of started to catch up after a while. So by 2014, when the market was really hot in Saskatchewan, it was 50,000 to 66,000. But then, since, leading in later on, 2015, 16, 17, it's kind of petered off to, around the 42,000. So we don't know what these numbers are today. CMHC is supposed to be using these for their affordable program with MLI Select, but they're still using 2019 data. And arguably, it's because the rents have ballooned since then. So I think if they applied a 2023 rents, that's a lot more that can fit under the affordable program. So CMHC is not highly motivated to change the numbers from what we see here, in 2019. So these are the numbers they're going to continue to go on. The purpose being on this, I just wanted to give you an idea of the long-term trend to show that, although Saskatchewan is coming into its own, there's a lot going on. The incomes have always pretty much been substantially lower than that of Alberta. Now, that could change with in-migration and more industry coming to the province, but for the most part, Saskatchewan has been the poor cousin to Alberta, which is strongly why, I favor investing in Edmonton versus Saskatoon, although they definitely both have their advantages and disadvantages. 2017, Saskatoon was hit with a massive vacancy, like 20%. Edmonton didn't get hit quite as hard because all the fundamentals caved at once. I mean, that was potash, uranium, oil and gas, agriculture. It all died at the same time. But now we have all those factors coming into play. So Saskatchewan might actually outperform Alberta, especially around Saskatoon. If you think, fertilizer prices are going up like crazy, uranium is at a record high. Chemical Corp is trading at its highest valuation ever. The oil and gas sector is strong. So we might actually see it start to improve and maybe even lap Alberta at some point. But if we break it down regionally to cities, a very similar story between Saskatoon and Edmonton. Basically has the exact same house price today. But, early on when this chart began, 2006, 7, 8, it was significantly more expensive to own a home in Edmonton than it was in Saskatoon, especially around 2014. Significantly more expensive in Edmonton than Saskatchewan. But now you can see the incomes, they really started to change. This is a great example right here, around 2014 when the market was really strong in Saskatchewan. Incomes in Saskatoon were up to 60,000. And the oil crash, really affected Saskatchewan way more than it did Alberta. You can see there was a huge drop from 60,000 to 45 and then down to, 38,000 in income, which is why the economy sputtered so much and we had much higher vacancy. We had to give much larger rent incentives to Saskatchewan than we did to Alberta. So when I look at it in those terms, it was a lot rougher ride in Saskatchewan, and I think Alberta is definitely the way to go. So, in summary, where do I sit with all this? I think there's a lot of great places in Canada to invest. I see what's going on in Ontario right now. There's a lot of correction. The higher interest rates have really put a factor on, especially residential. But I think for commercial and multifamily, with the two illustrations I've just showed you between Saskatoon and Edmonton, I mean, both have really low rents, $1,000 for a one-bedroom. There is significant upside potential. I didn't even get into the in-migration on this video. This was just a short one. I just wanted to explain, the Western Investor article and maybe why they chose Edmonton as number 1 and Saskatoon as number 4 for their main targets in 2024. And I'm going to do the same thing. I think both of these cities are going to outperform the rest of Canada. The real wild card is going to be how much is Saskatchewan going to pick up? Is it going to catch up to Alberta with incomes? Maybe it has, but we just don't have the data yet. So stay tuned, folks. More to come. I do have a webinar coming up on underwriting, coming up on November the 23rd. So this is going to be at 5 p.m. Pacific. I'm going to show you guys all about how to evaluate apartment buildings. I'm going to talk specifically also about MLI Select and the differences in these regional markets. So I'm going to talk about, why my preference is on Edmonton versus Saskatoon. Some people have the other view, but I have my own reasons from my own underwriting why I prefer Alberta, and in particular, why my Edmonton is particular why Edmonton is my go-to area for investment. And I think it will be the foreseeable future. So thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm going to post a link to join the webinar below this when it becomes a recording. And I hope to see everybody on the 23rd. Please ask questions, ask comments. You know, I love feedback. This is my opinion. I love my opinion pieces. I'm not always right, but I am right a lot of the time. And I think I have this one right. So I think if you have a choice of where you're going to invest, I strongly suggest that you have a look at Edmonton in 2024. So thank you very much, folks, and we'll catch you on the next video.